What's going on, hikers? In today's video, I'm going to be giving you 7 mistakes that beginner backpackers often make. Hopefully, you can avoid these and have a better time on trail. If you're new to the channel, my name is Jeremiah Stringer, and here we talk about all things hiking and backpacking. So if you're into that kind of thing, consider subscribing because our goal is to raise your quality of life on trail. So starting off with number 1, let's talk about shoes for a second. Now, this is a very common topic in the backpacking world. You got things like, should you wear Gore-Tex coated shoes versus not? Should you wear trail runners versus boots? I'm not going to go super deep into that, but I will tell you that one of the biggest mistakes that new backpackers make is they buy the wrong shoes for them. Now, you probably won't know what you need in particular until you get some experience on trail. I would suggest maybe buying your shoes at a place like REI or something like that that has a return policy. That way, if the shoes are not a good fit for you, then you can just send them back. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you just wear them for your entire backpacking season and be like, these didn't work for me, so I'm just going to return them. That would be abusing that return policy. But some things to keep in mind. Boots, they will give you a little bit more ankle support. Trail runners, for me, were a little bit more comfortable. Of course, this is going to be different for everybody. The biggest thing is to buy the right size. So whether you buy boots or trail runners or sandals or those 5-finger toe shoes or whatever you want to buy, I don't really care. Buy whatever you want. Just make sure they're the right size. There's a quick little test you can do whenever you put the shoes on. You can make sure that there's at least a width of a thumb in between the end of your shoe and the end of your toes, and that's going to give yourself a little bit of room, especially going downhill if your shoes or your feet in your shoes slide forward. Another thing you can do is the bump test, which is basically where you tie the shoe on and then you just tap the ground with the front of your toes and make sure that the front of your toes aren't hitting the front of the shoe, because basically what happens is you'll lose toenails on trail because your toenails will keep bumping the front of that shoe. So just some things to keep in mind whenever you are shoe shopping before you get out on trail. Number 2 on our list today is about electronics. Another big mistake that beginners make, and everybody's pretty much been there. I think you go somewhere and you need to charge your phone or some device and you forget the cord. Maybe you have the little power brick to stick into the wall, but you don't have the cord, or vice versa. So this holds true on trail as well. A very common mistake is you'll bring your battery bank, right? And you'll be like, wow, I got 20,000 milliamp hours. I can charge my phone several times. I can charge my headlamp, whatever devices you bring with you, your GPS device and whatnot. But if you don't have the cord to go between your phone or your device and the power bank, well, you basically have a paperweight, something that you're carrying around that's not very much use to you. So keep in mind, whenever you take your electronics, double check and make sure you have the right cords for whatever devices that you're bringing with you. Number 3 on our list today is make sure that you are familiar with your gear before you take it out on trail. Now, I have completely been there before multiple times. I don't know why I do this to myself, but you'll go out on trail and you'll be all excited about this new piece of gear, and then you get out on trail and you're not really sure how to use it. And it could be missing a piece that you should have taken out on trail with you, but make sure you're familiarizing yourself with your gear. If it's a tent, set it up in your backyard. Maybe even sleep in it overnight somewhere around your house, or you could car camp with it. If it's a hammock, definitely set that thing up. You don't want to be out there and it's cold and your fingers are numb and you're trying to figure out how to set this stuff up and it's getting dark on you. It's too much. And even a sleeping pad. I don't know if you've heard this before, but sleeping pads can come from the factory with a hole in it somewhere or a seam not sealed properly. So I even, whenever I get a new sleeping pad, will air it up and let it set overnight. And then I'll come and check it the next day to make sure it doesn't have any holes in it. So just some friendly advice for you. Make sure you're familiar with your gear before you take it out on trail. Number 4 on our list today is spending too much money on gear. Now, myself, I have spent so much money on all this gear, and I love trying out new stuff, and it's great. And if you want to check out the things that I take out on trail, I will link them in the description below. And I'm not going to go into all those pieces of gear, but feel free to click through there and see what I take. I am going to consider, however, both sides of this coin. One side, you have budget gear. We all love saving money, but this gear, it's going to get the job done. It is probably inexpensive, but it may be a little bit heavier. May last a little bit longer because it's a little bit more hardy. On the other hand, you have ultralight gear. May not last as long, but it's going to save you weight in your backpack. It's also going to cost you a little bit or a lot more money. So we kind of have to find a happy medium in between. So my strategy is, if I do buy a piece of gear and it doesn't fit my needs, I feel like I've spent too much money on it, it's not really useful to me, I could just resell that item. A couple of great places to resell is like Craigslist or eBay, but my favorite place is the Facebook Marketplace, or a lot of these backpacking groups on Facebook are exclusively geared toward reselling new or even used gear. So check those out, and maybe you can make some of that money back and make somebody else happy and get yourself a new piece of gear with that money. Number 5 on our list is underestimating just how difficult the trail or trip is going to be. I know that it's definitely happened to me in the past. We went to Colorado not too long ago, and I was like, I'm in pretty good shape. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I'm not going to take this and this just to save myself a little bit of weight. And then I get up there, and we're backpacking at 13,000 feet, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm walking like 1 mile per hour, because this elevation, it could be the elevation, it could be the terrain that you're going on, it could be just how many miles that you have planned. So I'll link the whole video above, and if you want to check it out and see our adventure, I'd be more than happy to share it with you. But some strategies you can use while you're backpacking. Figure out some potential spots that you could camp along the way. Some that are a little closer than you thought that you were going to end up at. And I remember we got to this pass in Colorado, and we didn't have the right gear for it. So if you don't have the right gear for the situation you're in, us for instance, we probably needed crampons, ice axes, snowshoes, something like that. I'm not familiar enough with that type of terrain. There's 4 or 5, 6 feet of snow that you're going to sink down to your waist in because it's so wet and soggy. And if you actually slip, you're sliding down 200 feet into rocks off the side of this mountain. So do not be afraid to turn back if you find yourself in some circumstances that you're not prepared for. Absolutely no shame in it whatsoever. There was no shame in our game on this trip. We turned right back around. We're like, this is not happening. We're not prepared for it. Don't have the right gear. So number 5, do not underestimate just how difficult the trail is going to be. Not to scare you, but be cautious and make sure that you're prepared. The number 6 mistake that beginners make is not having the proper repair kit for their gear. You bring a first aid kit for your body to repair it. Why wouldn't you bring it for your gear? So that's exactly what I do. And in my first aid kit for my gear, my repair kit, I bring things like tenacious tape. And if you're not familiar with it, I'll link it in the description below, and you can order exactly the same thing I use if you're interested in that. But it's basically tape that sticks especially well to fabrics, things like you can see behind me my underquilt. I know some of you are probably tired of hearing me talk about this, but some hot hands that I was using, I threw in my backpack, burned a hole in my underquilt. And I've just stuck a piece of tenacious tape on it. It's holding perfectly. I am a little bit concerned about ever washing that underquilt though, because I'm afraid the tenacious tape will come off. So I'll probably need to sew an actual patch on it. But tenacious tape is going to get the job done. My wife's used it. The seam on her sleeping bag completely came apart. I have no idea why, but we put a piece of tenacious tape on it a couple of years ago, and it's holding perfectly. Also, if you want to sew something like a shirt, piece of clothing, possibly a rain jacket, something like that, you can sew it closed with dental floss and a needle. And that needle can come from your first aid kit that you're using to pop blisters or something like that. So just a few pieces of first aid for your gear can come in super, super handy on trail. I burn holes in my puffy jacket literally like every time that I go on trail, because I love making a fire and staying warm at night, sitting around that fire and hanging out with friends. and the little pieces of tenacious tape, you just cut them, stick them right on. You can do it when you get home, but if you burn a big hole in your jacket, you don't want all those feathers to just be flying away. So make sure you're bringing a repair kit for your gear. Number 7 on our list is partying too hard. It is fine if you want to take something with you out into the backcountry. Just make sure you're following the laws and the guidelines for your park or state or wherever you're at. But the last thing you want to do is wake up the next morning and be hungover and still have to walk 15 miles to your car to go home. You're all groggy and you feel like crap. And also, make sure you're courteous to other people or groups that are around you. I remember one time in particular, there's some kids, they're pretty young, 21, 22 years old, and they stayed up drinking really, really late, yelling. The more you drink, the more you got to yell to the person that's right in front of you. And that's fine, but don't do it right next to another group of people. And the next morning, they were crushing cans at 6 a.m., 4 feet from our tent. My wife's trying to sleep, I'm getting up, and I had to get up and tell them, hey, you may not have realized this, but it's very non-courteous of you what you're doing. And I know that you're kids and you don't really think about the other people that are around you sometimes, but just take that in consideration and use this as a learning experience. I'm not trying to virtue signal here at all. I just want to make sure that we're all aware of having some empathy and sympathy for the other people around us. So be courteous to the other people on trail, whether it's partying or music or yelling or whatever. If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure you give me one of these. Comment below some other mistakes that beginners make or that you've made in the past, and share the video if you've liked it. We'll see you in the next one.